she saw him kiss another woman, right there, through the glass window of the house they shared. The house where she had hung her favorite curtains. The house where she kept her extra toothbrush in the holder next to his. The house where she had cooked for him, prayed for him, stayed up waiting for him when he came home late, and always had some excuse.
Hello everyone, welcome to this special story. Today's story is about a big plumpy woman who caught her fiance cheating and drove away with a broken heart. Then one accidental meeting with a mysterious stranger changed everything. But the mafia boss is hiding a dangerous secret that could destroy them both. This is a story of beautiful healing and finding love when you least expect it.
She nearly fell. Her knees went soft. Her hands gripped the door frame. Before her body could betray her completely, everything in her chest just dropped, like something cut a string she didn't even know was holding her together. Lana Clayton stood outside that glass door for longer than she should have. Long enough to see it wasn't a mistake. Long enough to see the other woman laugh. Long enough to see Marcus, her fiance, pull that woman closer like she was the one he had promised forever to. She didn't go inside and scream. She didn't throw anything. She didn't cry on the floor or demand answers. She found the courage to go inside, quietly, like a woman who had already made her decision. Marcus and the woman were in the back room. She could hear low music playing. She didn't go toward the sound. She went to the bedroom, pulled out the big suitcase from under the bed, the one she had bought for the honeymoon they kept planning and never booked. She'd packed her clothes, her toiletries, her grandmother's photo from the nightstand, her journal, the little money she had in the drawer, her chargers. She didn't slam anything, didn't write a note, didn't leave her ring on the kitchen counter dramatically like in the movies. She just left. Didn't speak to anyone. Not her mama, not her best friend Zora, not a single soul. She got in her car, started the engine, and drove. Lana didn't have a plan. She just knew she needed water. She had always been like that. When things got too loud in her head, she needed to be near something wide and quiet, something that didn't need her to explain herself. She ended up at a small beach resort near Virginia Beach. Not the busy tourist side, but a quieter stretch where the sand was pale gold and the waves came in low and slow. She had driven past it once years ago and always told herself she'd come back someday. Someday became that night. She checked in with just her suitcase and a face that dared anyone to ask her if she was okay. The woman at the front desk, a tall lady with silver braids piled high and a name tag that said Celestine, looked at Lana for 1 second too long. "Single occupancy?" Celestine asked. "Yes." Lana's voice was flat. "Final." Celestine didn't push, just handed her the key card and said, "Breakfast starts at 7. The beach access is through the side gate. And honey, the sunset from room 14 hits different." Lana almost smiled. Almost. Room 14 was small, clean. It smelled like sea salt and laundry soap. There was a little balcony that opened up right toward the water. She didn't unpack everything, just took out enough to survive the night. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a while. Then she got up, walked onto the balcony, and stood there while the sky turned every shade of orange and pink she'd ever seen. The wind was warm. The waves were soft. The world out there had no idea that her entire life had just come apart. She was still standing there when the tears finally came. Not loud tears, not dramatic tears, just quiet ones, slow and steady, like the tide. She cried for the years she had given, for the dinners she had made, and the arguments she had swallowed to keep the peace, for the way she had shrunk herself, her big laugh, her loud opinions, her fullness, just to make Marcus more comfortable. She had made herself smaller, and he still chose someone else. She wrapped her arms around herself, because that's what you do when there's no one else to hold you. By the second day, she had barely eaten. Celestine, the front desk woman, had slid a plate of fruit outside her door at noon without knocking. Just knocked once and walked away before Lana could refuse it. Lana ate the fruit. By evening, she made herself get up and walk to the beach. Not because she felt like it, just because she didn't want to be found dead in a resort room from sadness and dehydration. The beach in the late evening had its own kind of quiet. A few couples walking, some kids building something in the sand, an old man flying a kite by himself. Lana found a spot away from everyone, took off her sandals, let her toes sink into the cool sand. She was wearing her favorite yellow dress, the one Marcus had once said made her look a bit too much. She had almost left it hanging in the closet at his house. Almost. She was glad she didn't. She stood there at the water's edge, closed her eyes, tried to remember what peace felt like. That was when it happened. She didn't see him coming. Why would she? She had her eyes closed. 1 second she was standing there breathing sea air and trying to convince her brain that she would survive this. The next second, cold, wet, everywhere. She gasped and spun around. A man stood in front of her, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dark pants and a white linen shirt that now had a large wet stain on the sleeve to match the massive wine stain now ruining her yellow dress. He was holding a half-empty glass, or rather, he was holding what used to be a full glass of red wine before apparently all of it had launched itself directly onto her. He stared at her. She stared at him. Then she looked down at her dress. The yellow dress, the one Marcus had called too much, now soaked in deep red wine from the chest down. Something cracked open inside her. Not sadness, not grief. Anger. Real, clean, fresh anger. The kind that has nothing to do with crying. "Are you serious right now?" She said it louder than she meant to. He blinked. He hadn't moved. He hesitated. "My dress." She gestured at herself. "This dress. Look at it. I see it. Then say something." He opened his mouth, closed it. He was looking at her the way people look at something they weren't expecting to find, like she had startled him more than he had startled her. "I apologize." Calm, direct, no fumbling. "You apologize." She repeated it back at him, like she was testing the weight of the word. "That's it. I'll replace it." "Oh, you'll replace it." She almost laughed. The audacity. "You think I want you to go buy me a new dress?" He paused, considered. "What would you prefer?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Honestly, she didn't know. She was operating on 2 days of barely eating and a broken engagement, and now this man had drenched her favorite dress and was standing there looking at her like she was the interesting one. "I want you to explain how a person spills an entire glass of wine on a stranger who was just standing there." He looked down at the glass, then at her, and she would think about this later. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close. "I turned too quickly. You were closer to the railing than I realized." She hadn't even noticed there was a railing behind her. She had been standing near the little beach sidebar area without realizing it. She exhaled. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded handkerchief, a real handkerchief, not a paper napkin, and offered it to her. She took it, pressed it uselessly against the stain that was already deep into the fabric. "This isn't going to help." She muttered. "No," he agreed. "It won't." She looked up at him. Really looked. He was Korean. Sharp features. Dark eyes that didn't move away from hers. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't apologetic in the way people usually are when they're trying to get out of something. He was just steady, watching her like she was worth watching. "What's your name?" she asked. Didn't know why she asked it. Maybe just to feel normal for a second. "Jian." He said it simply. "Jian Zhang." "Jian." She tried the name. "I'm Lana." A beat. "Lana." He said it back in a way that made it sound like he was storing it somewhere careful. She looked back down at her dress. The whole front was ruined. This was the worst day. This was genuinely the worst day. But standing there, stained and barefoot in the sand, glaring at this stranger with his empty wine glass and his calm face, she felt something. Not attraction, not yet, not even close, but something, like a tiny light turning on in a room that had been very, very dark. She went back to her room and changed. She didn't think about Jian Zhang again that night. She lied. She thought about the steadiness of him, the way he hadn't tripped over himself trying to fix it, the way he'd said her name. But mostly she thought about Marcus, and the glass window, and the woman. She cried again, softer this time. Then she fell asleep to the sound of the ocean. And just like that, a spilled glass of wine, a ruined yellow dress, and a stranger named Jian Zhang had entered Lana Clayton's worst week. She didn't know it yet, but nothing would ever be the same. Jian had seen her before she saw him. That was the thing about Jian Zhang. He always saw everything first. It wasn't a gift. It was survival. Years of watching rooms before entering them. Years of clocking exits before sitting down. Years of knowing exactly who was standing where before anyone knew he was there. So yes, he saw Lana Clayton walking down the beach path before she got anywhere close, and his stomach did something it had no business doing. He was in the middle of a deal, not a business deal, not the kind you shake hands on and put in a contract, the kind you finish quickly and quietly, with two men who don't use their real names and never meet in the same place twice. Day one, the shorter of the two, with a scar above his left eyebrow and a ring on every finger, was still talking, laying out numbers, laying out timelines. Jian was only half listening, because Lana was walking this way. She had her sandals in her hand. Her new dress, dark green this time, was moving in the wind. She wasn't looking at them yet. She was looking at the water, but she was heading in their exact direction. And if she got close enough to see his face next to these two men, she would see something she wasn't supposed to see. He didn't panic. Jian Zhang didn't panic, but he moved fast. "We're done." He said it low and flat, cutting day one off mid-sentence. Day one blinked. "We haven't confirmed the..." Confirmed. Jian said it like the word ended the conversation, because it did. The second man, thin, quiet, went by the name Rock, straightened up immediately. He knew that tone. Everyone who worked near Jian knew that tone. Day one looked like he wanted to argue. One look from Jian, and he thought better of it. Same channel. Jian said, "Low. Final." Both men turned and walked the other direction without another word. 30 seconds. That was all he had. He walked toward Lana. She was looking at the water when he appeared at her side. "Lana." She turned, and something moved across her face. Surprise, then recognition, then the guarded look she gave him when she wasn't sure whether to be annoyed or not. She had given him that look every time they crossed paths since the wine incident, like she hadn't yet decided what category to put him in. "Jian." She said his name carefully. "You're heading toward the far end?" He asked. "Maybe." She squinted at him. "Why?" "The maintenance crew set up equipment down there this evening." He said it smoothly, completely calm, not technically a lie. There was maintenance equipment somewhere on this beach. Probably easier to go around. She looked past him toward the direction she had been heading. He watched her eyes scan the beach. The two men were already gone. "Good. I didn't see any signs." She said slowly, "They don't always put signs." He said it like it was obvious. She gave him one more look. That look, the one that said she wasn't entirely sure she believed him, but couldn't prove otherwise. "There's a table over there." He nodded toward a small seating area near the beach bar, far enough from where he had just been standing, close enough to the open air that she'd feel comfortable. Sit with me. She raised an eyebrow. You're asking me to sit with you? Yes. After you ruined my dress. I offered to replace the dress. I said I didn't want you to replace it. So sit with me instead. A pause. Consider it a different kind of apology. She stared at him for a long moment. He let her stare. He had learned a long time ago not to fill silence with nervous words. Silence was just space. It didn't need to be fixed. Finally, fine, she said, like she was doing him a favor. Maybe she was. They sat across from each other at a small wooden table with a citronella candle between them that the wind kept trying to blow out. She ordered lemonade. He ordered water. The server, a young guy with locks named Tobias, brought both without asking twice. For the first stretch of it, neither of them said much. Lana had her hands wrapped around her glass, looking out at the water. Jian watched the beach the way he always did, cataloging, checking, old habits. You do that thing, she said suddenly. He looked at her. What thing? That. She waved her hand vaguely. Scanning, like you're looking for something. He paused. Just a habit. From what? He considered his answer carefully. Business. What kind of business? Another careful pause. Import. Export. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. That's the most nothing answer anyone has ever given me. He almost smiled. What do you do? She shifted in her seat. I'm a social worker. Was. AM. I don't know right now. She said the last part quietly, like she hadn't meant to add it. He didn't push. Just waited. I specialize in family cases. She continued after a moment. Kids, mostly. Kids stuck in situations they didn't choose. She paused. I take it personally. My supervisor always says I take it too personally. Do you think she's wrong? Lana looked at him. Really looked. No, simply. But I also can't help how I'm built. Something about the way she said it. The complete absence of apology in her voice. Like she had made peace with who she was, even on a day when everything else was falling apart. Jian found himself leaning in slightly without realizing it. They talked for almost 2 hours. Not about deep things. Not yet. They talked about small things. The way the Virginia Beach water looked different at different times of day. The worst meals they had ever eaten. Whether it was possible to actually enjoy black coffee, or whether people just said they did to seem serious. She laughed at something he said about airports, and it was the kind of laugh that doesn't hold anything back. Big and sudden and real, like she forgot for a second that she was supposed to be sad. He stared at her when she laughed. She caught him staring. What? Nothing, he said. You're doing it again. The staring thing. I wasn't aware it was a thing. It is definitely a thing, Jian. First time she said his name like it was easy. Natural, not careful. He looked away toward the water, mostly to give himself a second to be a human being without showing it on his face. The thing was, people didn't usually talk to Jianzhang like this. They talked at him, around him, very carefully near him. They chose their words with both hands. They watched for his reactions before they finished their sentences. Lana talked to him, straight, direct, unimpressed by him in a way that had nothing to do with disrespect. She just didn't perform for him, didn't calculate her words, didn't look for his approval. She was the first person in longer than he could remember who treated him like he was just a man sitting at a table. And that was the most dangerous thing she could have done to him. The sun had dropped completely by the time she stood up to leave. I should go. She picked up her sandals from the sand beside her chair. Same time tomorrow? He asked it before he had decided to ask it. She tilted her head. You're assuming I have nothing better to do. Do you? A pause. No, she admitted. Then, quieter. No, I really don't. She walked back, toward the resort. He watched her go. Then he pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from a number saved only as a symbol. No name. No words that could be traced. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he looked up at the direction Lana had gone. He knew that whatever this was had to stop before it went anywhere real. His world was not the kind of world you brought someone like Lana into. She was clean. She was good. She spent her days pulling children out of hard places. His world was the hard place. But he had said, same time tomorrow. And she had said yes. He told himself it was harmless. Just two people at a beach talking. Nothing more than that. He was very good at lying to himself when he needed to be. The next few days flew. Morning walks along the shoreline, where they somehow always ended up walking at the same time, without planning it. Evening conversations at that same table, with the candle that kept losing to the wind. He learned that she grew up in Richmond, Virginia, the second of 4 daughters, that her mother made the kind of potato salad people drove an hour for, that she once convinced an entire school board to change a policy by showing up to 3 consecutive meetings with perfectly organized folders and absolutely refusing to leave. She was something. She learned that he had been in the import-export world since his early 20s, that he had lived in 4 different countries before settling in the States, that he took his tea without sugar and read actual physical books and had a deep, quiet distaste for dishonest people that he didn't explain further. She didn't push on the things he kept vague, but she noticed them. You do that thing again. She said one evening. What thing? You answer questions without answering them. She was looking at him sideways. Like you give me enough words to seem like you answered, but nothing you said actually told me anything real. He was quiet for a second. Most people don't notice. He said, I notice things. She said simply, it's literally my job. He looked at her. She looked back. The candle between them finally went out completely. Neither of them moved to relight it. Jian went back to his room that night and stood at the window for a long time. He had built walls for a reason. Very tall ones. He had needed those walls. They had kept him alive, kept the people around him safe, kept the world he operated in from bleeding into any part of himself that was still ordinary. Lana Clayton was standing at the base of those walls, and she wasn't even trying to get through them. She was just existing, talking to him, laughing at his dry humor, calling him out with zero hesitation, asking questions he didn't have clean answers to, and the walls were shaking anyway. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass. He couldn't keep this secret from her. Not forever. She was too sharp, too present, too real for him to keep redirecting and evading and choosing words that sounded like answers. He had maybe a few more days before she figured something out on her own. And then what? He didn't have an answer. Not one he liked. He thought about the men he had met on the beach their first real day together, about the calls he had been taking in short windows when she was away, about the reason he was in Virginia Beach at all. Not vacation, not rest, but a specific piece of business that his name alone could settle without anyone needing to get loud. He thought about what he really was, and then he thought about the way she laughed, and he made a choice that was probably the most reckless choice he had made in 15 years. He decided to stay just a little longer. The beach had given Lana back something she thought she had lost. Her laugh, her appetite, the feeling that tomorrow was worth showing up for. And Jian Zhang, feared by men who feared nothing, had sat across from one woman at a table with a broken candle and come as close to scared as he had been in years, because he was falling, and he already knew it was going to cost them both something. We are right at the edge. The connection is real. The secret is getting heavier, and Jian knows time is running out. And hey, if this story is pulling you in, you already know what to do. Share it with someone who needs a good story today, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what comes next. It happened on a Thursday, not a dramatic night, not a stormy sky or a power outage, or any of the things that usually signal in stories that something is about to go wrong. Just a regular Thursday evening with cicadas outside the window and the low hum of the ceiling fan and the smell of takeout containers on the small table by the balcony door. They had eaten dinner in his room. His idea. He had ordered from a place Tobias the server had recommended, a small soul food spot in Norfolk that did their cornbread in cast iron. Lana had eaten 3 pieces of that cornbread without apology, and Jian had watched her enjoy it the way he watched everything she did lately, like it was worth paying attention to. After dinner they had talked for a while. Then the conversation had slowed the way conversations do when 2 people are comfortable enough with each other to let silence sit without rushing to fill it. Lana had fallen asleep on the small couch first. She didn't mean to. One second she was listening to him talk about a city he had lived in near the coast of South Korea, and the next second her eyes just closed. Jian had watched her sleep for a moment. Then he moved her gently to the bed, draped a blanket over her, and settled into the chair by the window with a book. He fell asleep in the chair sometime after midnight. His phone was on the bed. He had set it down when he cleared the takeout containers. Face up, unlocked. He always locked it immediately out of habit, but tonight he had been distracted. She had said something funny right as he set it down, and he had looked up to respond and just forgotten. 3 hours later, at somewhere around 2 in the morning, the screen lit up. Then again. The buzzing didn't wake Jian. He was deep in the kind of sleep that only comes when your body has been running on tension for too long and finally lets go. But it woke Lana. She opened her eyes, slowly, disoriented for a second. Then she remembered where she was, and her body relaxed. She lay still for a moment, listening to the ceiling fan. The phone buzzed again. She turned her head toward it. The screen was bright in the dark room. She could see from where she was that there were multiple notifications stacking up. She told herself not to look. She looked, not because she was snooping. At least that's what she told herself. She sat up and reached over, just to turn the screen face down, so the light would stop. That was the plan. But the screen was unlocked, and the notifications were right there. And the first one she saw made her stop completely. It wasn't in English. Some of it was in Korean, but some of it, the parts that had been typed fast, probably under stress, had slipped into English mid-message. And those English parts were enough. Perimeter confirmed. 3 moved. The Richmond contact is asking questions. Handle before Friday. Package cleared Virginia port. No interference. Boss. Day 1 says the Chesapeake arrangement needs your sign-off tonight. She stared at the screen. Her brain was doing the thing it did with her most complicated case files. Sorting, connecting, filing each piece in the right place, even when she didn't want it to. Day 1. She had heard that name. Where had she heard that name? Then she remembered. 2 days ago, in a conversation she had mostly been half listening to, Jian had taken a phone call and stepped outside. She had heard him say the name through the thin balcony door. She hadn't thought anything of it. She thought about it now. She scrolled up, just slightly, just enough. There were photos. Men she didn't recognize, standing in what looked like a warehouse. Shipping containers. A dock she couldn't place, but that looked like it could be anywhere along the Virginia coast. And Jian, in one of the photos at the edge of a group, not smiling, wearing a jacket she had seen him in before, standing in the middle of people who looked nothing like businessmen. She put the phone down. Her hands were not entirely steady. She sat at the edge of the bed in the dark room and stared at the wall. Import, export. That was what he had told her. That first evening at the table. Import, export. She had thought it was vague, because he was private, because some people just didn't like talking about work, because not everyone explained their whole professional life to a stranger they just met at a beach. But it wasn't vague because he was private. It was vague because it wasn't true. She looked at him across the room, asleep in the chair, head tipped slightly to one side. He looked ordinary. In sleep, all the steadiness and control softened into something that just looked like a tired man resting in a chair. She had started to care about this man. She had started to really care, and she had no idea who he actually was. She didn't wake him. She picked up her sandals from beside the couch, picked up her bag from the floor, moved to the door as quietly as she had ever moved in her life. She paused at the door for just a second, didn't look back, walked out. Back in her own room, she sat on the edge of her bed and tried to breathe slowly. She didn't call anyone, didn't type anything into her phone, didn't write in her journal, didn't do any of the things she usually did when something was too big to hold alone. She just sat with it, and slowly, carefully, the way she had trained herself to think through her hardest cases, she started to plan. She wasn't going to confront him. That was the first decision. She had seen what confrontation looked like when the other person held all the power. She had watched it in case files. She had seen what happened when someone revealed too soon that they knew too much. She was not going to walk up to a man with connections on every level and say, "I saw your phone." No, she was going to create distance. Slowly, carefully, in a way that looked natural. She was going to seem like her feelings were simply fading, like the beach magic was wearing off, like she was starting to think about going home, and then she was going to leave. Clean, safe, quietly. She could do this. She was a social worker. She had learned how to stay calm in rooms full of things that terrified her. She could absolutely do this. Except it turned out she was not as good at pretending as she thought. The next morning, she was the one who was already sitting at their usual table when he arrived. She had planned that on purpose. Better to be in position than to be caught walking toward him and having to compose herself on the way. He sat down, looked at her. "You left early." His voice was neutral, but his eyes were doing that cataloging thing. Got cold. She picked up her glass. Casual, easy, you know how it is. A pause. "You had a blanket." She looked up, kept her face still. "Jian, I just got cold and went back to my room. It's not a big deal." He watched her for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then he picked up his water glass and looked at the ocean. But he didn't fully relax. She could tell. Over the next 2 days, she was careful. She showed up when she said she would, smiled when something was genuinely funny, answered questions with real answers. She wasn't going to be cold. Cold would be too obvious. She was just going to be slightly less warm, slightly more in her own head, slightly more like a woman who was starting to think about her real life again. It was working, mostly, except for the moments when she forgot to perform, like when he said something dry and unexpected and she laughed before she remembered she was supposed to be creating distance, or when he bought her a new candle for the table, a proper windproof one. Without saying anything about it, just set it down and lit it, and she had to look away before her face said something she didn't want it to say. Or when he asked, very quietly on the second evening, "Are you all right?" Not, "You seem different," or "What's wrong with you?" Just, "Are you all right?" She had looked at the candle. "I'm fine." Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. He didn't say anything else, but his jaw did something. Tighten, maybe, just slightly. He knew. She could feel that he knew something was off. She just didn't know how much he knew. By the third day of her quiet withdrawal, she had started making actual plans to leave. She had opened her laptop twice to search for the drive back to Richmond. For hours. She could leave in the morning and be home before noon. She could call her sister Arnell. She could go back to her apartment, the one she kept even when she'd been spending most of her time at Marcus's house. Thank God she had kept it. She could go back and sit in her own space and figure out what the next part of her life looked like. Away from Marcus, away from the glass window and the woman and all of it, and away from Jianzhang with his steady eyes and his windproof candle and his secrets and his phone full of things she was never supposed to see. She deserved a quiet life. She had always deserved a quiet life. She just had to get through 1 or 2 more days without falling apart or giving herself away. But Jian was not going to let 2 more days pass. That same evening, he was standing at the water's edge when she came down to the beach. She had planned to take a short walk on the far side, away from their usual spots, accidentally run into the crowd near the volleyball courts, stay visible but not available. He was standing right in the middle of her path. He didn't look like he was waiting. He looked like he was thinking, standing with his hands in his pockets, looking at the water, completely still in the way only he could be. She almost turned around. Almost. But he turned first, looked directly at her, like he had heard her footsteps, or sensed her, the way he always seemed to sense things before they arrived. She kept walking toward him, because running would have been worse. "Walk with me." He said it when she was close enough. Not a question, but not a demand either. More like a request from someone who was done waiting. She fell into step beside him. They walked in silence for a while. The sun was going down. The water was turning gold. "I know something changed." He said it to the water, not to her. She kept her eyes forward. People change. Moods change. It's Lana. Just her name. Calm, but with weight in it. She stopped walking. He stopped too. She stood there looking at the water, and her heart was doing something loud and unhelpful in her chest, and she was trying very hard to look like a woman who had nothing to hide when she was full of something to hide. "I'm thinking about leaving soon." She said it before he could say whatever he was about to say. Going back to Richmond. Getting back to real life. When? Maybe the weekend. Silence. "Is that the only reason?" he asked. She finally looked at him. He was watching her. Not angry, not cold, just watchful. And underneath the watchfulness, something that looked almost like bracing, like a man preparing himself for something he already knew was coming. She almost told him. She almost said, "I saw your phone. I saw the messages. I saw the photos. I don't know who you are, and that terrifies me. But instead, I just think it's time." She walked back toward the resort before he could respond. She thought she had bought herself 2 more days. She had bought herself less than 12 hours. Lana knows. Jian knows she knows. And they are both pretending. But that pretending is about to yendi. Everything comes out, and nothing goes the way either of them planned. And before we get there, if this story has been keeping you company today, share it with someone who loves a good twist. And subscribe, because we tell stories here that stay with you. Her phone buzzed. One message. From Jian. "Come to the beach. Please." She stared at that last word for a long time. Please. She had never heard him use that word before. Not like that. Not with that kind of weight behind it. She put on her shoes and went. He was sitting in the sand. Not at the table. Not standing the way he usually stood. Straight. Controlled. Aware of everything around him. He was just sitting. Knees up. Hands loose. Looking at the water like it owed him something. She sat down beside him without a word. The ocean moved. The sky was the color of old pewter. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Jian said, "You saw my phone." Not a question. She didn't deny it. Yes. He nodded slowly, like he had already known and just needed to hear her say it. "I'm not going to pretend it was nothing," he said, "and I'm not going to insult you by lying again." She kept her eyes on the water, waiting. He took a breath. And then Jian Zhang, a man who had not told his real story to a single living person in over 15 years, started talking. "I have 3 older brothers." He said it simply, like that was the only place the story could start. She said nothing, just listened. "In my family, the oldest son carries everything. The name, the respect, the future. The second son carries the backup plan. The third son carries the hope that maybe one of them will be enough." A pause. "And the fourth son, The youngest, the smallest, the one who came last and surprised everyone, carries nothing, means nothing, is nothing. His voice was even, but she could hear something underneath it, something old. My brothers were not cruel the way strangers are cruel. He continued. They were cruel the way family is cruel, which is worse, because family does it in the kitchen, at the dinner table, during holidays, in front of your parents who say nothing because they agree. She turned to look at him. His profile was still. His jaw was set. They called me soft. He said, my whole childhood. Soft. Weak. Too quiet. Not enough. My oldest brother, Hyunsu, once told me, in front of our entire extended family at a New Year's dinner, that I was the kind of son a man forgets he has. Silence. I was 11 years old. She felt something move in her chest. I decided that night. He hesitated. I decided I was going to become something that no one could ever forget, something no one could ever call small again. I didn't know what that looked like yet. I just knew I was going to find it. He found it slowly. Then all at once, he had been sharp in school, not celebrated, just quietly sharp, the kind of student teachers noticed, but didn't know what to do with. He had moved through his teenage years invisible and furious, which was a dangerous combination. At 19, he had taken a job with a shipping company in Virginia, a legitimate one, genuinely. Long hours, low pay. He learned the ports. He learned the routes. He learned which inspectors were thorough and which ones were not. He learned which cargo moved cleanly and which cargo moved with help. And then, one evening, a man named Park had sat across from him at a dinner he hadn't been invited to and said, I've been watching you. You see everything and you say nothing. That is a very valuable skill. I knew what Park was. Jian said, I wasn't naive. I knew exactly what world I was walking toward, but I was 22 years old and I had spent my entire life being told I was nothing, and Park was telling me I was valuable. He said the word like it still had a particular taste, so I walked toward it. He rose through that world the way water rises, quietly, and then suddenly all at once. He was careful where others were reckless, patient where others were impulsive. He never raised his voice, because he never needed to. His name started meaning something in rooms he had never even entered. By 30, he was running operations up and down the Virginia coast. Norfolk, Newport News, the port stretches that fed into the larger networks. He was not the biggest name in those rooms, but he was the most reliable. And in that world, reliable was worth more than loud. His brothers heard about him eventually. Hyunsu called me. He said, first time in 6 years. He was very warm, very suddenly interested in how I was doing. Asked if we could have dinner. A pause. I told him I was busy. Lana almost smiled. Despite everything, almost. But power doesn't clean itself. Jian said. His voice dropped slightly. The higher you get, the more you see. And what I started seeing. He stopped, reorganized his words. I started seeing who actually got hurt. Not the men in those rooms with me, not the ones running things. The people who got hurt were always the ones who had nothing to do with any of it. Workers, families, people who just happened to live near the wrong dock, or work for the wrong company, or trust the wrong landlord. He turned to look at her then. First time he had looked directly at her since he started talking. You told me you became a social worker because you take things personally. He said, because you can't help how you're built. She remembered saying that. First week, at the table with the candle. I understand that. He said he had started using what he had built differently, not stepping away. He was too embedded for a clean exit, and he had tried twice and learned quickly that some doors don't open from the inside. But redirecting, quietly at first, using his network to surface information about landlords running illegal housing operations and feeding it to the right journalists anonymously. using his connections at the ports to identify trafficking routes. Not to participate, but to disrupt, tipping off federal contacts through layers that couldn't be traced back to him. The man who ran a feared network on the Virginia coast had spent the last 4 years using that same network to quietly take apart things that deserve to be taken apart. "Nobody knows," he said. "Not the men I work with, not the people I help, not anyone." She stared at him. "Then why are you telling me?" He looked at the water for a long moment. "Because you were going to leave. Quietly. And I couldn't let you leave thinking I was just another man who lied to you." Something in her chest cracked, clean down the middle. She stood up. He didn't stop her, just looked up at her from where he was sitting in the sand, waiting for whatever came next. She walked a few steps toward the water, stood there. Her mind was doing that sorting thing again, filing, connecting, laying everything out. Jian Zhang had built himself into something terrifying to survive a childhood that told him he was nothing. He operated in a world with no clean edges. He had blood on his hands in ways she couldn't fully see and might never fully know. He had also redirected children away from trafficking routes. He had put corrupt men in front of journalists who destroyed them. He was using the most feared thing he had ever built to protect the exact same people she spent her days trying to protect. She didn't know what to do with all of that. She turned back around. He was still sitting, still waiting. He had the look of a man who had already accepted that the answer was going to be no, who had decided that telling the truth was worth it, even if the truth cost him everything. She walked back and sat down beside him. "I'm not going to tell you that everything you've done is okay," she said, firm, clear, "because I don't know all of it. And some of what I do know." She paused. "I'm a social worker, Jian. I have seen what the world you operate in does to people. I have held those files. I have sat with those kids. I know," he said. "I need you to know I'm not glossing over that. I don't want you to." He looked at her. "I never wanted someone to look at me with less than the full truth. That's the only thing I actually never wanted." She looked at him for a long time. He looked back. No pretending now. No redirecting. No carefully chosen words that sounded like answers without being answers. Just two people sitting in the sand with the whole complicated truth between them. "The woman," Lana said suddenly. He waited. "The one Marcus was kissing." She said it like she was testing whether she could say it without falling apart. She could. Barely. "I saw them through the glass. I didn't say a single word to either of them. I just packed my bag and left." She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. "I had been making myself smaller for 3 years," she said, tucking in my opinions, laughing quieter, wearing clothes he approved of, convincing myself that was just what love required: sacrifice, adjustment, making room for the other person even when the room you were making was inside yourself. Jian said nothing, listening the way she had listened to him, and he still chose someone else. She said, not with bitterness, with something more tired than that. "So I drove here because I needed water and I needed nobody asking me if I was okay." A long pause, and then some man spilled wine all over my dress. Jian, for the first time since she had met him, laughed. A real one, short and surprised and completely unguarded. She looked at him when he laughed, and she thought that is who you actually are, under all of it, that right there. "I'm not going back to Richmond this weekend," she said. He went still. "I'm not saying everything is simple," she added quickly, "because it's not. Your life is not simple, and I'm not pretending it is. But I'm also not going to run from the first honest conversation I've had in 3 years just because it's complicated." He looked at her, something in his face that she had never seen there before, something that looked a lot like relief, the kind that goes all the way down. "I don't know what this looks like going forward," she said. "I think we don't know what it looks like, and I think we need to be honest about that." "Yes," he said. "And I need you to keep being honest with me, even when it's ugly." "Yes," he said again, no hesitation. "And Jian," she met his eyes, "the people you've been protecting through your network. The families, the kids." She paused. "I have resources you don't have. Case files, legal contacts, advocacy networks. If you're serious about what you said." She let that sit. He stared at her. "You would do that." He said it slowly, like he was confirming it was real. "I take things personally," she said. "I can't help how I'm built." He looked at her for a long moment, and in that moment, sitting in the sand on a beach in Virginia, where a glass of red wine had started all of this, Jian Zhang looked like something she hadn't expected. He looked like a man who had finally, for the first time in a very long life, been seen. Not fixed, not saved, not cleaned up or made simple, just seen. They sat there until the sky went completely dark and the stars came out over the Virginia water, and the waves kept coming in low and slow the way they always did, unbothered by anything happening on the shore. Nobody resolved everything that night. Nobody made grand promises. Nobody pretended the road ahead was going to be smooth or clear or without cost. But two people who had both spent years being something less than their whole selves sat next to each other in the sand and chose. Not perfectly, not without fear, not with any guarantee of how it would end, to stay. 3 weeks later, Lana Clayton drove back to Richmond. Not running, not empty. She had 3 new case referrals in her bag, names given to her by Jian, people in the Virginia coast communities who had fallen through every crack the system had, people nobody was looking for. She was going to look for them. Jian walked her to her car that morning, stood by the driver's side door while she loaded her bag into the back seat. She turned to face him. "You're going to call." She said it like a statement, because she wasn't about to make it a question. "Yes," he said, "and you're going to keep being honest with me, even the parts that are hard. Especially those," he said. She looked at him one last time. Then she got in her car and drove home. In the rearview mirror, he stood in the parking lot until she turned out of sight. She didn't see him reach into his pocket and look at his phone. Didn't see him scroll past all the coded messages and unanswered calls. Didn't see him open a new contact, saved simply as Lana, and type 3 words. "Drive safe, please." It had started with a spilled glass of wine and a ruined yellow dress. It had no clean ending. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was real. And after everything, after Marcus, and the glass window, and the long drive, and the beach, and the secrets, and the sand and all of it, real was exactly enough. And that's a wrap on this story. If you stayed from that very first batch, all the way to this moment right here, thank you. Seriously, you are the reason stories like this get told. If this one moved you, made you think, or just kept you company today, share it with someone who needs a good story this week. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button, because we have so many more stories coming that you are not ready for.